Welcome to your in-depth weekly astrology overview and zodiac forecast for week commencing the 11th of November. I'm going to share with you some standout details to look out for. Then on screen, the event chart right at the start of the week, which gives us a lot of important guidance on how the following 7 days will unfold. But also, as aspects come into the week, I'll outline those for you too, before going through each of the 12 signs from Aries through to Pisces to give you a flavour of what you can expect in terms of your ascendant, sun or the moon. If you're new here, it's great to have your company. If you're a returning visitor, thank you so much for your return. If you've yet to subscribe to the channel, we have found that about 45% of people who enjoy my videos regularly are not subscribers. Please help the channel to thrive by clicking that sub button, but also tap or click the bell notification symbol. If you'd like to have a one-to-one with me, I'm a consulting astrologer. Please check out my testimonials below. I don't edit these, I share them as is. If you'd like to take advantage of your personal year 2025 forecast, you'll also get your free Zodiac, Love and Chinese forecast, as well as the rest of this year 3. It's 30% off, and you'll also get your Life Roadmap report. All this information is tremendous value and will give you searing insights to guide your moves. Please see below for more. So on the screen now, I'm showing the event chart right at the start of the week. You can see the sun is coming to the end of the second decan in the sign of Scorpio at 19 degrees and 5, but it's in a quincunx with Jupiter. Jupiter is very much to do with buoyancy, optimism and expansion, but it's in retrograde. It's in a sign that it's not happy in, it's detrimented. So any claims, particularly around finance or business, that are made do need to be scrutinized. Now, ironically, Mercury is in the sign of Sagittarius, also detrimented, but that's squaring up to both the moon and Saturn at the start of this week. In fact, Saturn and Mercury square, the first of 3, becomes exact on Tuesday. Something could be discussed which really gets blown out of proportion. This could happen in our personal situations. We may see it on the world stage. So just be aware of that. If there are some confidential issues that are important to you and you want to keep them exactly that, this is not a week to open up to someone you don't know very well or someone you can't entirely be sure of. But Venus, you can see, is on the anaretic degree in Sagittarius, but moves later on Monday into the sign of Capricorn. Now, Venus may well be about relationships. It may well be about desire, but you can see it is emerging from a mysterious and perhaps confusing right angle with Neptune. So its move into Capricorn is a helpful thing in a way, because Capricorn is very realistic. Venus can be about money. The sign of Capricorn is about physical culmination. So if we're thinking about a property situation or how to marshal family finance, Venus in Capricorn can be an asset to us. So some of the confusion that has been created by Venus's square with Neptune can start to clear. But if someone has been a little bit tricky, dishonest, or even two-faced, as last week came to a close, I feel as you come into this week, Venus moving into Capricorn certainly gives you a chance to get really real about what the circumstances are. But of course, the big story of this week is not just the full moon, it's that Saturn ends its long retrograde, which began at the end of June in the sign of Pisces, and it's retraced its steps, and Saturn's return to 12 degrees, so it's retraced its steps by about 6 degrees, means that wherever Saturn has been impacting on your natal chart, that may have been where you've felt things were very slow, a sense of limitation and frustration. But also on Friday, we have the full moon. And that's where the sun moving into the third decan of Scorpio is so important, because that's sub-ruled by the moon. The moon in the sign of Taurus is exalted, so it likes to be there, but it's just that Uranus is very close to the event. Uranus has been creating a lot of mischief and a lot of provocation, particularly around the cost of living, since March 2019. Foodstuffs, agriculture, the cost of fuel have all been influenced in part by some things that have gone on the world stage. So this is a particular full moon which asks us to make sure that the ins and outgoings around our finances are working well. But Uranus is saying there could be something we suddenly become aware of, or we could have a flash of inspiration to do something in a bit of a different way. Now, the sun is going to be opposite Uranus for around about a week from the time of the full moon. So if we did see some volatility on the world stock markets, it wouldn't be a complete surprise. But ironically, we also have another opposition as this week draws to a close, but it's between the aforementioned Jupiter and Mercury. And a bit like the square with Saturn and Mercury, there's going to be 3 of these as well. And the reason for that is that Mercury is set to go soon through a retrograde in Sagittarius. Now, this is one of those aspects, and it peaks on the Monday following this week, that can actually be very buoyant and optimistic. One of the things we need to avoid, however, with these two in this relationship is over-promising. Much better to play things down a little bit and then make sure that we deliver more, because that can create a certain amount of exaggeration. We may also encounter somebody who's quite belligerent, because Jupiter can be about dogma in some ways, and in the sign of Gemini there can be a tendency to express ideas quickly but not necessarily fact check them. So we just need to be aware of these issues as this week draws to a close. But I feel that things will suddenly be very, very intense, and there could be a lot of news and a lot of information coming out into the open. And that's going to be intriguing. Please stay with me as I go through each of the 12 zodiac signs, from Aries through to Pisces, from the perspective of your ascendant, sun or the moon. So Aries, your week commencing the 11th of November forecast still sees the excitement of your ruler Mars having moved into the sign of Leo, a fire sign like yours. That gives you so much more opportunity to showcase your talents, to have fun and be much more demonstrative. But Mercury, also which moved last week into the fire sign of Sagittarius, that starts this week being moderated by the restraining influence of Saturn. Maybe something that does need to be discussed is a little bit delicate. It may be something that you feel quite strongly about. It could be a subject that someone else definitely wants to avoid looking at. So there could be some tension that is caused by that. But once Saturn goes direct on Friday, I feel that's going to be very good for you internally, because since the end of June, if you have felt that your physical and also emotional energy has been lower, and it's just felt much harder to find that spark, Saturn going direct, Mars being in Leo, are definitely going to help you. But also Venus moves at the start of this week into Capricorn. If you do need to relate to someone in a professional situation over the next 3 or 4 weeks, perhaps with a presentation or through an interview, the chances are that you can articulate who you are in a very skillful way, and that could create a very strong impression. But of course we do have the full moon this week, and the full moon is really an opportunity to think about the ins and outgoings in your situation, particularly in terms of Uranus, because Uranus could give you the sudden desire to be a bit more impulsive with your resources. But also it's possible that with Jupiter and Mercury being in an opposition as this week draws to a close, that you start to see something in a new and fresh way, and perhaps with a much greater amount of enthusiasm and also optimism. So even if this week does start off feeling rather delicate, perhaps even a little worrying, you're not quite sure of where someone's coming from, by the end of the week, I think there is going to be a sense that you're coming into your energy a lot more. Mars is definitely helping this process. It's certainly going to be cheering you on, particularly through to the 6th of December whilst it's in forwards motion. And sometimes we have to speculate in order to accumulate, but I feel Saturn going direct this week is going to help you to overcome some of the inhibitions you may have recently experienced. So Taurus, your week commencing the 11th of November forecast begins with your ruler Venus relocating into your sister Earth sign of Capricorn. Now, this has a number of different dimensions. One of them is that Venus here can be very much a truth seeker. Now, if a relationship has not necessarily been so easy recently, and I must stress this could be with a friend or a colleague, the clash between Mercury and Saturn on Tuesday could tease into the open the reality of this. But then, if you recall, the new moon in your sign of the 8th of May was when you set your intentions about something. This week, with the full moon in your sign, you're going to find out how that has played out. But the release of the full moon, which can create a lot of intensity, is also being stimulated by the electric energy of Uranus. So that can be quite impulsive. If there is a situation where you feel penned in, you're going to be much more rebellious and much more inclined to speak your truth. Now, whether it's with a romantic partner about what you spend your money on and your interests, or the budget in the home, the domestic budget, or it is in a professional situation, as Jupiter goes opposite Mercury and the Sun and Uranus face off towards the end of this week, and that goes into the week following this one, that need to be freer, which Venus can make you more aware of, is certainly going to be emphasized. But for some people, Venus moving into Capricorn can be a call to action to book a vacation. If you're someone who loves the sun or loves skiing, perfect time to explore and immerse yourself in a new and fresh environment. And if you meet some new people, that can be very stimulating, and that could be how the full moon works for you. You have a sudden connection with someone that really is very exciting, because Uranus can make things happen very quickly. But if you're penned into a friendship, a business relationship, you work for someone that you're not really enjoying it, or you are in a romantic tie where you don't feel you can really quite be yourself, this is going to be a critical week when you could push back and show your need to be a lot more assertive. So Gemini, your week commencing the 11th of November forecast sees Venus dive deep on Monday, but this can have some real benefits for you in terms of shared finances, resources, investments, or if there has been someone who's really been capturing your imagination, this could be the signal that you and they can align in a much more committed way. But Mercury, your ruler, is challenged by Saturn at the start of this week. It becomes exact on Tuesday. If there is something around your professional life, particularly around a relationship, which is a little challenging, the chances are it can seem a little overpowering, perhaps even brittle and tense across these days. Ironically, Saturn goes direct on Friday. If you recall, Saturn has been retracing its steps since the end of June. Your worldly interactions may have felt quite heavy since then. If you've really had to dig in when it comes to your professional or worldly activities, it wouldn't be a surprise. So Saturn going direct can help to release the handbrake. But Friday also sees the full moon, but it's a complex full moon for you in particular because it's so close to the disruptive energies of Uranus. There's a potential for things to come into the open over the next couple of weeks in quite a turbulent way, especially around your work situation. Someone you thought was very much in your corner may disappoint you with a sharp observation. Whether they say it to you personally is another matter. And yet Jupiter in your sign, despite its retrograde, does go face to face with Mercury towards the end of this week. Your innate enthusiasm, optimism, and ability to convey your ideas to defend your position can certainly be emphasized by this. However, that particular full moon, especially as the Sun continues to be opposed by Uranus in the days following, does suggest that something that may be a little tentative or awkward, or that you're wanting to keep very much close to your chest, could have a tendency to come into the public domain. So Cancer, your week begins with Venus, the planet of relating, but also of money, moving into your opposite sign. Venus loves being in what's known as the 7th house. You get an opportunity over the following 28 days to bring a greater sense of understanding and equilibrium into all sorts of relationships. If you have met someone recently, this can be an opportunity to get to know each other even better. In ongoing relationships, Venus in the 7th house asks us to celebrate the things we have in common. Now, if a contractual matter or something to do with travel, higher education has seemed rather challenging since the end of June, things can ease from Friday with Saturn going direct on the same day. We also have a sparkling full moon. Full moons release energy, and it's possible because the Sun for you is in the part of your situation to do with showcasing your talents and creativity, and can also be to do with your social situation, that you may need to get a little bit of space from someone who's been crowding you somewhat recently. You can let them down gently with Venus in the 7th house, but you could find yourself orientated over the next couple of weeks to some fresh possibilities. Also with Jupiter and Mercury in an opposition as this week draws to a close, that can give you the opportunity to think very profoundly about certain situations and strands. You may do some research, you may meditate on what you really want, but the combination of that opposition, but also the full moon, could push you and guide you into a new initiative which could prove to be truly exciting for you. It's possible, for example, that you may join some new events or new hobby or interest groups. And through the people that you encounter there, that can bring some extra delight and freshness into your situation. But if you are in a relationship of any kind at all, which is not really working for you in terms of you don't feel you can be completely yourself, I think this week's events do suggest that you may want to assert your individuality in a much more powerful way. And if that's the case, then why not? So Leo, your week commencing the 11th of November forecast begins with Venus, the relator, but also the money planet, moving into a very practical location. The host is Capricorn. When it comes to an existing relationship, and particularly if you live together, getting a fairer balance of the domestic chores is going to be a great way to create more goodwill in the run-up to Christmas. But if you're meeting someone or would like to meet someone new, don't be surprised if you get chatting to someone in a very ordinary location. However, at work, a rapport you have with one particular colleague can be very helpful to build goodwill that could be good for your business situation. Now on Tuesday, Mercury, in a playful, flirty part of your chart, is challenged by Saturn. Saturn's been retracing its steps since the end of June. If you have got a good idea and you do need to speak to someone, perhaps someone rather influential, you really need to make sure that you thought this through carefully before you discuss it with them. But Saturn going direct is something we're all going to celebrate. If you have felt that anything to do with close involvements, to do with your long-term finances, or if you're a business owner, have felt really quite uphill since the end of June, things can ease. But the full moon, which also occurs on Friday, is in the part of your situation to do with your connection to the world, but it's very close to Uranus. However you're feeling, it's going to be much more difficult to disguise it from others, because you can be quite private insofar as you like to maintain an aura of control, and also you like to be respected. You may find yourself feeling a little bit uncertain. It's possible that something to do with your home or emotional life is in some ways having an impact on your desire to develop a new idea, perhaps with a new business. And that could see you having to juggle home and your professional demands over the following 2 weeks. But there is a very jolly opposition between Jupiter and Mercury towards the end of this week, which could prove to be even quite fortunate for you. Your greatest gift, Leo, is your charisma, your warmth, the ability to just convey confidence to people. So whatever's going on in your situation, even if things seem to be changing quickly, that quality can shine out as this week comes to a close. So Virgo, your week commencing the 11th of November forecast begins in glorious fashion as Venus, the relator, the planet of charm and graciousness, moves into the part of your situation which is very much to do with pleasure, romance and sociability. The run up to Christmas can definitely have an extra glow with the presence of Venus here. If you'd like to meet someone, you can certainly feel much more desirable with Venus in this location. If you're in an existing relationship, it's a reminder to do some lovely things together to engender that flame of attraction. But this is a week when your ruler Mercury does square up with the stern Saturn, and that occurs on Tuesday. When it comes to the arrangements for Christmas, perhaps within the family, someone may see something very differently to you. That could create a point of tension. But on Friday, Saturn ends a retrograde which began at the end of June. If you have found that relationships in general with anyone, whether it's colleagues, friends, neighbours, or family members, have felt a little cooler, or not everyone's understood where you are coming from, things can just seem to ease. But Friday also sees a full moon. Full moons can create a lot of emotional energy. This one is very close to Uranus, a planet which has been having quite an impact on your sign in particular since March 2019, pushing you to be a bit more experimental and break out from some pretty set patterns you may have had in the past. But it's also this part of your chart about freedom, travel, independence. If there's a relationship that's not working so well for you, the next couple of weeks could be the point when you may want to assert your independence. Also, because the Sun continues to oppose Uranus for another week, there could be some tension if someone is resisting your ideas. But Mercury, your ruler, also goes face to face with Jupiter towards the end of this week. If you are looking at somewhere new to live, it is going to be important to stay as realistic as possible. You're often the embodiment of realism, but if you do find yourself seeing or discovering a flat to rent or a home you really would set your heart on, there is a possibility with Jupiter opposite Mercury that you could be a little bit too ambitious. So Libra, your week commencing the 11th of November forecast begins with your ruling planet, your guide, Venus, gliding into the sign of Capricorn. Capricorn can be very much about property, but for you this represents the fourth house, which is the internal part of where we live. Because you have often very good taste and refinement, this is a great opportunity to deploy that, especially if you've got some guests staying over the Christmas period, whether you need to move some furnishings around, clear out a spare room, declutter, redecorate, or even get some new sumptuous and classy furnishings. Venus will certainly help in the process. But Tuesday suggests you shouldn't rush anything. Mercury, the planet of communication, is clashing with Saturn. Saturn's in a part of your chart that's very much to do with details and in exacting details. The enthusiasm of Mercury in Sagittarius is wonderful, but it can have a tendency to just focus on the big picture. Someone's precision could trip you up. Now, Saturn is going to be going direct on Friday after retracing its steps since the end of June. If you have found since March 2023 that your work or obligations and responsibilities have felt quite a burden, I feel that Saturn going direct can ease things for sure. But also you may have found that your physical vitality was a little lower and you've had to marshal what you have had carefully. But the full moon on the same day asks you to cast your mind back to the 8th of May, because then there was a new moon in Taurus, and that may have been when you set your intentions over an investment, a property matter, a business, or perhaps some shared resources. You can find out on this event just how things are going to play out. But if there is something around your ins and outgoings that's slightly misaligned and you're not quite getting the balance that you're famously appreciative of, this is a great chance to think afresh about how you may do that because of the electric energies of Uranus, which is very much to do with innovation in the mix. It's quite a joyful opposition between Jupiter and Mercury at the end of this week, however. You could find yourself having a playful or even a flirty encounter with someone that you meet. So Scorpio, your week commencing the 11th of November forecast has at its heart a big opposition between the Sun and the Moon. Yes, it's the full moon, which occurs on Friday, but it does have Uranus, the planet of surprises and rebelliousness, very close to the Moon. If we go back to the new moon of the 8th of May, that was giving you an opportunity to think about the type of relationship you would like in your life. But because since the end of June, Saturn, the planet of limitation, has been retracing its steps in your 5th house, which is about the romantic dimension of relating, things may not have been particularly easy. Ironically, Venus, the relator, moves into a beautiful part of your chart right at the start of this week. And whatever you need to discuss, if you can choose your words with care and diplomacy, that will certainly help. It's just that Mercury, the communicator, is challenged by Saturn on Tuesday. And however much you do try to be diplomatic, it is possible that something could still seem a little awkward. Saturn goes direct on Friday. That's something to welcome. If you are a creative and you've had to work so hard to showcase your talents over these last 5 months, you should find it a little easier to do now. But the full moon, being so close to Uranus, suggests that if you have been very single-minded about what you want to achieve as an individual, someone you're close to may just let you know that they felt a little bit perhaps neglected. However, because the Sun in your sign goes on to oppose Uranus for some further days, maybe talking this through isn't necessarily going to be so easy, because Uranus is a truth seeker, but it could also make you a little bit impatient if you feel that someone's not tuning into the demands and strains that you've been going through, perhaps to do your best, as you see it, for them. So some energy can come out into the open, but that does give you an opportunity to clear the air, which could be welcome. And despite the fact that you can often be very canny when it comes to resources, by the end of this week, as Jupiter and Mercury go opposite, you could find yourself tempted to splash out on something just to give you some uplift. But then again, it could be something that actually has some kind of practical value to you, or perhaps even some kind of investment. So Sagittarius, your week commencing the 11th of November forecast begins with Venus, the planet of relating, but also of loot, moving into your sector of everyday money. This often provides an uplift in terms of our finances. It could be that you're going to find something down the back of the sofa or in an old jacket, but equally there could be some other serendipity that could absolutely thrill you. But if you have been on quite a stringent diet, you may find that your liking for any calorific goodies does increase. However, on Tuesday, Mercury in your sign clashes bitterly with Saturn. If you're discussing something with a family member or of a more delicate nature, someone can seem very unyielding, not particularly sympathetic, which could frustrate. But if your home, emotional and family situation has just felt under strain generally since March 2023, it could be because of Saturn. Saturn can be about achieving things through hard work, endeavour and application, but it certainly can make us much more aware of limitations. So Saturn going direct after retracing its steps since the end of June is definitely to be welcome, despite that little bit of a tiff with Mercury on Tuesday. But Friday also sees a full moon. It's a full moon for you in the part of your situation to do with practicalities. Now, Uranus has been quite a challenge there since March 2019, and you may have found that your life has lacked some kind of basic routine. Now, you're one of the signs that can thrive on change, adventure and independence, but I think for most of us we do like to have some kind of rhythm or pattern, and Uranus has made that difficult to find. So that issue could come up again. It's also in an opposition with the Sun Uranus, so something that isn't quite working for you, perhaps even around your well-being, if there's something that's been just not quite working as you would like, you may need to look at it over the next couple of weeks. Perhaps it's your work-life balance. Perhaps it's not giving yourself enough time to recharge. Perhaps just generally you feel a little on edge. The great news, however, is that as the week draws to a close, a delicious opposition between Mercury in your sign and Jupiter, your ruler, suggests that whatever you're dealing with at the moment, there could be a connection or a conversation that really makes you smile. So Capricorn, your week commencing the 11th of November forecast begins with Venus, the planet of relating, but also of presentation, moving into your sign. You've got an opportunity with this transit over the following 28 days to give yourself a glamorous makeover. Don't be surprised if you draw some new admirers in your direction. Now, if you have gone through some soul searching recently, perhaps around your relationship prospects, perhaps if you've separated from someone or just not been sure about someone you continue to see, it's going to help you to move into the moment. But there is a clash on Tuesday between your ruler Saturn and Mercury. Mercury continues in a very sensitive part of your chart, the 12th house. That can be a part of our existence where people aren't necessarily particularly open or upfront with us. So conversations need care on Tuesday. You may learn something that could prove to be a little bit wounding. Now, Saturn is going to go direct on Friday. If you have found that there's been challenges around technology, or you felt a little bit more rigid and not quite in the mood to be as active, or perhaps you've even made a big decision over a mode of transport, things can start to speed up more favourably. The full moon, however, which occurs on Friday, does have the electric energies of Uranus applying to it. And for you, it occurs in a very social area, but one which is very much about your needs, whereas the sun is in the part of your situation to do with your connections, your friendships, your circle of alliances, you may find yourself wanting to do something a little different. Now, if you have gone through a breakup with Venus in your 12th house, it's possible that someone new is going to come to the centre of your world quite quickly. Whether this relationship would be long lasting is another matter. So there could be some instant excitement, but not necessarily a lot of commitment. As the week draws to a close, Jupiter and Mercury are in an opposition. If you do feel a little tender, particularly with that clash between Mercury and Saturn earlier in the week, someone with a great deal of understanding of life and people's attitudes could give you some important support or guidance, which can give you quite the lift as this week draws to a close. So Aquarius, your week commencing the 11th of November forecast begins with Venus, the planet of relating, moving into a very secluded, private part of your situation. You could find yourself becoming very nostalgic for someone from your past. There's the possibility of meeting up with old school, college or work colleagues, because the 12th house can be where we really feel things very deeply. Unfortunately, if there is a relationship that is bumping along the bottom, this could encourage you to make that final decision to break free. Now, your traditional ruler Saturn clashes with Mercury in a very social part of your situation. It's perhaps the case that there may be something you get invited to or would like to do, but may not feel that it's quite worth it on Tuesday, and someone close to you could feel a little bit disappointed. Saturn actually goes direct on Friday. If you have found that your everyday finances have taken a little bit of a hit over the last 5 months, and just also that's had an impact on how valuable you feel, this can be a point when you can start to get on the front foot. The full moon, however, on Friday is the classic work-life balance full moon. The electric energies of your modern ruler Uranus suggest that things in terms of your home and family life can be quite changeable. There may be people who suddenly need your support, and that could, as you see it, interfere with what you want or need to do professionally. But also, having Uranus on that 4th house in the full moon is a great prompt to create space in your home. So Aquarius people often have an appreciation of personal space, but sometimes when we declutter, it does have an immediate impact on the energy within our home. So do think about what you can do. Now, as the week draws to a close, there is a very positive opposition between Jupiter and Mercury. They're both technically debilitated in the signs they occupy, but that creates a mutual receptivity. They're bouncing off each other, and despite the fact that perhaps some home or professional situations or those finances may be demanding your attention, as the week draws to a close, you could end up having a very playful, joyful, or even flirtatious chat with someone. And if it is someone from your past, that can make it all the more intriguing indeed. So Pisces, your week commencing the 11th of November forecast begins with Venus, the planet of relating, moving into the most social part of your situation. With the upcoming festivities, your timing is impeccable. This certainly can lead to some very pleasurable encounters. If you're in a relationship, Venus here is asking you to celebrate the things you have in common rather than the things that make you different. If you're single, it could be that a friend or a friend of a friend could be critical in terms of meeting someone as Christmas races up. But Saturn in your sign, in its retrograde, has been quite an exacting influence since the end of June because of its retrograde. Now it goes into a square with Mercury in the part of your chart to do with your connection to the world. You may find that someone seems a bit grumpy or a bit difficult, perhaps at work, on Tuesday. Try not to get too affected by this. Actually, things are going to ease for you. And the full moon, which occurs also on Friday, sets up a connection between the moon, which loves being in Taurus, it's exalted here, and Uranus. So you could find that your energy is really heightened, but it may be very difficult to switch off. If you are having a discussion with someone over the following couple of weeks who does see things very differently to you, it's important not to be too entrenched, because the sign of Taurus and where the sun is in Scorpio are both fixed signs. Uranus creates a lot of electricity, but if we don't bend, that rigidity then creates a lot of tension. As the week draws to a close, Mercury, however, does forge a lovely opposition with Jupiter. The part of you that is strengthened by Jupiter, which is your traditional ruler, is when you can bring your heart into situations, or your perceptiveness. And it's possible that someone who earlier in the week was quite tricky to deal with actually can tune in to your qualities. And you're not going to hold back in defending your position with that full moon. And why should you? But with Venus in such a lovely location, even if there does need to be a frank discussion, the chances are you can pick and use your words with a great deal of care.